Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call. Today is May 29th. We're close to halfway through this year. There's a lot going on. This is going to be a little bit different call today. I think it's necessary from time to time to change things up, especially when circumstances dictate. So I'm going to move quickly through the information that we ordinarily discuss because I wanted to talk about some other things that I think are going to be important for us to consider as we move forward with the journey we're on here with the Iraqi dinar and some of these other currencies. First, let me state that most of what I'm going to discuss today is going to be my opinion. I will offer certain facts into evidence, but then I'm going to give you my opinion about what I think they mean and why it's important for us. So first, let me start and say this. In my opinion, and as far as I'm concerned with regard to the Iraqi dinar, it's done. The Iraqi dinar will reinstitute and revalue, in my opinion, very shortly. And there's nothing else for me really to discuss. I could get into the particulars about what happened since last Wednesday, but, I've been doing this for, over a decade, so I'm done with that unless it's absolutely necessary. And I'll get into my reasoning in just a moment. The point of no return for the reinstitution and revaluation for the Iraqi dinar began on January 1st of this year when the citizens of Iraq were prohibited from using the U.S. dollar for the purchase of goods and services in country. As far as I'm concerned, that was a point of no return, and the powers that be within the country knew that the reinstitution and revaluation were going to be coming. A lot has gone on in country as well. The government of Iraq has really substantially increased both its U.S. reserve and its holdings of gold, and that's for a number of reasons. I think the increase in the U.S. reserve is not only to help stabilize the country and help to eliminate some of the issues they have with the multiple currency system that they have, but I think they're going to need the USD in the interim between January 1st, the date where the use of the dollar was outlawed for the citizen, and government expenditures that need to occur up until the day that they reinstitute their currency. Second, I think that the substantial purchase of gold is done for one reason, to make sure that they have a Basel-compliant currency. Why would you increase your holdings of gold if you plan to operate with the United States dollar as your reserve currency? That doesn't make sense to me. It seems that the only reason you would want to substantially increase your gold earnings is to help with the value of their own currency when it comes out of the sanctioned program rate. What's Iraq done? It's passed a 3-year budget, established multiple international currencies to rebuild their infrastructure. They're now involved in currency swaps with other nations. They've got their, as I said, the massive increase in their purchase of gold, and they're currently working with the IMF, the World Trade Organization, the United States Treasury, Bank of International Settlement, and others. None of this makes any sense at all if Iraq remains in a sanctioned program rate. So in my view, all of the things that are going on are not only going on with the assumption that the dinar will reinstitute shortly, but if they don't have a specific rate, they certainly are working within a plausible parameter of rates in order for them to do all of the things that they've done. So now we've reached a point where Iraq has two options and two options only because of what they've done since January 1st. They can either reinstitute and have their currency placed onto the Forex for revaluation globally, or they'll be a failed nation state. They simply do not have enough sufficient reserve currency, that is USD, to fund all of the contracts that they've signed. And what about the players that were parties to those contracts? Do you really think they signed multi-billion-dollar contracts with a country who cannot demonstrate to them their ability to fund those contracts? I don't think so. So that's why I say, as far as I'm concerned, this is done. And some of the people whose opinion I respect are of the same opinion. Now, this means that in the not-too-distant future, we're going to be going to the banks to negotiate our exchange. But when we go to the bank to negotiate our exchange, we will not be negotiating to receive a United States dollar. We will exchange our currencies for Federal Reserve notes. What's the difference? A United States dollar is currency issued by the federal government pursuant to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It's the people's money. It belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to a private corporation, and we pay no interest for it. A Federal Reserve note is currency issued by the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor is it a reserve. It's a private corporation that's been contracted to produce dollars, helicopter money out of nothing, for which we pay interest. And just to explain how bad it's gotten, the interest we now pay the Federal Reserve for their helicopter money is more than we will spend this year on national defense. That's an absolute crime, and it's got to stop. Now, why are we paying interest when we could simply execute Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, allowing the people to create their own interest-free currency? Well, the answer, of course, something called the Western Central Banking System. What is that? In my opinion, the Western Central Banking System is the longest standing criminal enterprise in world history. Let me give you a brief explanation of why I say that. Last year I did a rather long discussion, got into really intricate detail about the Western Central Bank System, but I'm going to shortcut it here and just deal with the things that you need to understand, because we hold currencies, we hold international currencies, we hope that they reinstitute, we want to go to the bank and exchange them for USD, so we're deeply involved in currencies, and it's a good idea to understand exactly what's been going on. I have to go back literally centuries to explain how we got to this point. In the year 1604, the Rothschilds and the Dutch House of Orange created the first Western Central Bank in Amsterdam. That bank operated for nearly a century. Then in 1694, William of Orange, a member of the House of Orange, married the Duchess of Windsor, part of the Windsor family, the royalty of England, and they founded the Bank of England. The Bank of England has existed ever since. The United States began as a series of 13 colonies in what is now the United States of America, colonies of England. And so they operated using the English currency. But for a lot of abuses and things that occurred to the colonists pursuant to the tyrannical edicts of George III, in 1776, colonies began their revolution of independence against England. They succeeded, but it took a long time. It took over a decade. But in 1791, England and the colonies negotiated the cessation of hostilities, and the colonies established their own independent nation. But as part of the agreement with England, they agreed to continue utilizing the currency of England, the Bank of England, and a 20-year contract. Well, in 1811, 20 years later, the United States of America decided that they were not going to renew the contract with the Bank of England. In other words, pursuant to their constitution, they were going to create their own currency. What happened a year later? The War of 1812. Now we're taught that the War of 1812 primarily had to do with reincorporating the colonies of the United States into the British Empire. And to some degree, of course, that's the case. But the impetus and the rationale for the war and the timing of the war had to do with one thing: the failure of the United States of America to re-up the contract with the Bank of London and create their own currency. Well, the hostilities continued, and finally in 1816, the United States agreed to re-up with the Bank of England in order to pay all of the debt that they incurred from the War of 1812. 20 years later, 1836, the United States once again failed to renew the contract with the Bank of London. The president at the time was Andrew Jackson, and he comes back into the story a little later. So the United States is operating now with their own currency. And then, of course, the issues going into each state issuing its own currency and the complications there. But something else happened. The Civil War had to do with slavery. President at the time was Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln made a decision. He decided that rather than borrow money from the Bank of England to fund the Civil War, he decided that he was not only going to exercise his powers pursuant to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, but he actually printed an additional $500 million legal tender, American legal tender, which funded the Civil War. This is why the Crown in England sided with and helped the Southerners finance the Civil War. Fortunately for the United States, the French, who had been at war with England on and off, decided they were going to assist the North, but that's another story. To make a long story short, Lincoln was successful in funding the Civil War without the need of borrowing from the Bank of London. The war ended, the Union was preserved. The United States operated with its own currency. Then in 1913, President Woodrow Wilson was successful in establishing the third central bank in the United States, which exists today. He sponsored legislation. He wanted the creation of a 16th Amendment to establish the Federal Reserve as the source of the currency, the official currency of the United States, and creation of a federal income tax to pay the interest on that debt. He failed in that effort. However, there was a Article 5 Constitutional Convention which narrowly succeeded in the creation of the Federal Reserve. Again, the Federal Reserve is not federal, it's a private corporation. And it produces money from nothing and charges us interest for the use of that money. Now, most people don't understand the Federal Reserve System and how intricately involved it was in our history. But let me leave you with this. A number of presidents, there have been attempted assassinations. 4 of those attempts were successful. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy. These were different men from different parties, from different times in our history, with different political philosophies. But they all shared one thing in common. They all tried try to end the Western central bank system in America. The reason you need to understand this is because when you go to the bank to do your exchange, you need to understand what you're exchanging for. And this will also help set up why I'm going to make certain suggestions about what we do with this money. Again, 1913 was the third and final Western central bank established in the United States as the Federal Reserve. Now, what was the function of the Federal Reserve? It was to control inflation and to make sure that our economic system was stable. Well, let's talk about what's happened since 1913. We've had one major depression, 7 recessions. Now, from 1813 to 1913, during that 100-year period, for most of that time, we either had no central bank or it was in the first 20-year system and they weren't able to really boot up to do what they wanted to do. So the purchasing power, the ability to purchase goods and services, was relatively stable for 100 years. In other words, what one could purchase in 1913 with $100 was the same amount that they could purchase in 1813. The purchasing power was intact. Now let's take a look at what's happened since 1913 to today. The goods and services that you could purchase for $100 in 1913 would cost you $2,150 to purchase today. That's the Federal Reserve System. Because they print more and more money, money becomes less and less valuable, meaning it's lost its purchasing power. Inflation is not the increase in the intrinsic value of an asset. It's the reduction in purchasing power. This is important because, again, we're exchanging our currency for a dollar that's dying. The Biden administration has printed over $7 trillion, thrown that into the system. That's why they can't make inflation go away. No matter what they try, they can't stop it because they started that snowball rolling down the hill, and now it's gained momentum, and they can't stop it. Enter Donald Trump, 2016. They hate the guy. He's a carnival barker, yeah, but that's not really why they hate him. He's a successful billionaire, and he's not in the Washington, D.C. club. Yeah, that's one of the reasons they hate him, but it's not the real reason. He says what he thinks, and he calls out corrupt politicians. Yeah, they hate him for that, but that's not the problem. So why do they absolutely hate this man? I'll give you a hint. Whose bust and picture were in the Oval Office when Donald Trump was president? It was Andrew Jackson, a Democrat. Well, that's odd. Why would a Republican president have a picture and bust of a Democratic president in the Oval Office while he was president? Well, I'll give you another hint. Donald Trump said that by the end of his second term, the United States would experience a democracy that they've never seen before. Well, Trump tends to speak in riddles. What he was saying was his intention in his second term, because he operated in his first term, he was able to create a good economy within the central bank system, but it couldn't be sustained long term. So what he was alluding to was the fact that in his second term, he was going to end the Federal Reserve Bank. This is why he's an existential threat to the establishment in this country. This is why they've done everything they can do to stop him. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but remember, they've already killed 4 presidents who threatened to do the same. They're doing everything short of that. Look at the recent case right now in New York. This case is an absolute joke and an embarrassment to our system. We're a laughingstock around the world, not because the other countries have a better system, but because our utter hypocrisy has shown. In this case, they've eviscerated Trump's 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments. This 4th Amendment right to privacy has been eviscerated by the continued attempt to put irrelevant information into this trial to bloody the man up. Why? Because in the event they aren't successful in this attempt, they want to do everything they can to dissuade people from voting for him in November. The second thing they've done is they've denied his 5th Amendment right to due process. How did they do that? They did something that's not only rare, but unheard of. It is rare in a trial to place gag orders. But when gag orders are utilized, they're put on both sides. Here, this judge has gagged the defendant solely, which means that all his political enemies can say whatever they want, that the prosecution can say whatever it wants, and he cannot defend himself. They've also denied him his 6th Amendment right. That is to know specifically what he's being charged with so that he can provide a proper defense. He's charged with a misdemeanor that's beyond the statute of limitation and bootstrapped it to an undisclosed election fraud statute. We are in closing arguments, and they have not cited the federal crime, the felony that he's committed. And we're in a state court. This is scary stuff. Why do I bring all this up? I bring all this up because the people running our federal government do not honor, let alone respect, the Constitution of the United States. So we, in turn, have to utilize every tool at our disposal to protect ourselves. Now, for over a decade, we've done these calls specifically earmarked to denarians and explaining why you have any asset that you anticipate a substantial increase in value, you need to get it out of title and into trusts in order to provide all of the protection that's available through the trust that would not be available to you as a citizen. But now I'm discussing these trusts as an American citizen who's beginning to understand what's going on here. And so we have to double down and say, not only are we not going to allow you to get away with ignoring our constitutional rights, we're going to exercise them, and we're going to dare you to try to take them from us. So let's discuss this from a perspective of a denarian, but any American citizen can come for the ride here. You have 10 million dinar. You purchase for $10,000. You expect them to revalue at the very least for $1, 1-to-1 with the U.S. dollar, meaning that's $10 million. You want to protect your privacy. You want to avoid civil litigation. You want to avoid a lot of other things which I'll discuss. So you establish your family asset protection irrevocable trust, and you assign the currencies to the trust. Those currencies subsequently revalue. But because they're in trust, no one knows that you possess this wealth. In addition, you place all of your other assets in this trust as well. That trust is sealed. No one knows what your actual holdings are. Not because you're trying to hide per se, but because it's none of their business. This trust does a number of things. First, makes it virtually impossible for you to be sued. If you've established this trust, literally the only thing you need to do is pay your taxes and behave yourself, and this trust is literally impenetrable. But there's other things besides just asset protection, because the federal government is not only going to do everything it can to preserve and protect its central bank system, which funds all of its nefarious activities, They want to know everything that you're doing. So they're trying as hard as they can to create a central bank digital currency. This means that our currencies will not be hard dollars, that they'll be able to force those of us that have accumulated hard dollars and they're holding them outside of the banking system to bring them into the system. And it means that once it's digitized, it's out of our control. It's been centralized. As you know, the government's trying to centralize everything. It's one of the reasons why they want to electrify everything so they can put it all on the grid and control us. Well, they're trying to do this with the currencies as well. And there's arguments that we can make to protect ourselves. For example, we can say, well, you can't have a central bank digital currency because you're violating my right to privacy. To which the government would say, well, you have no right to privacy because it's our currency and we just let you use it. To which we respond, well, you don't let me use it. I have to pay interest on it, so I should be entitled to the same level of privacy that I had when I didn't have to pay anything to utilize the currency. To which they say, well, that's too bad. That's the system we've established and you have to live with it. Well, you don't have to live with it. As I said, when you establish a trust, you protect and preserve your privacy. They don't know your net worth, your actual holdings. However, they do seem to have this one hook, and that is their central bank digital currency. Well, here's how you can get around that. States like Texas, Montana, and others are already in the process of creating their own state digital currency. It does not operate under the federal system. There is no credit score, and they will not divulge anything to the federal government because the states don't have to. So you establish your trust. You place all of your net worth in the trust. You have the privacy and the asset protection of the trust. The government's one hook, the central bank digital currency, has no effect on you because you establish bank accounts in those states that have state digital currencies, and you operate with your ATM cards and your credit cards issued by that bank. That way you're completely and totally off the grid. It's none of their business whether you bought a stick of gum or an AR-15. It's virtually impossible for them to get that information without going to a court of law and showing cause, establishing that you've committed some fraud. Absent that, it's airtight. These are the things that we're going to need to do to protect ourselves from these maniacal kleptocrats who are attempting to fundamentally transform this country. I've gotten into that. I don't want to do that today, and I don't want to belabor what I'm discussing here. But I'm watching what's going on TV. I see what this bunch in Washington are doing. I'll just give you one example of this. Actually, it's a sign of desperation. When they send a has-been out there, an old actor in New York across the street from the trial who is clearly unhinged. I'm not going to dignify him by giving you his name. You know who I'm talking about. It's exasperating, it's infuriating, but at the same time, it tells you the level of desperation that's involved there. It's going to be a very difficult year that we're going through. But what this trust is going to do, if things go well, but particularly if things go south, is provide airtight protection that they simply cannot get around. And so for this reason, along with the fact that things are moving very, very quickly in Iraq right now. They're dotting I's, they're crossing T's. I see absolutely nothing at this point. The momentum that is going on in that country is incredible. I mean, this is like the birth of a nation. This is a nation that 20 years ago was absolutely cratered. And now it's the shiny new toy that everyone wants to get a piece of. So we're in a very, very good position in terms of the currencies. We're not in so good a position in terms of the direction of the country. I believe in my heart that this is all going to change for the better. But irrespective of what happens, you need to protect yourself by establishing your family asset protection trust package, whether you're a holder of currencies or not. I'll even go so far to say that if you don't do this, with the direction this country is going right now, there will be a two-tiered system. There will be people who have exercised their right to protect their privacy and their wealth, and there will be people who don't. And the people who don't will pay a price heavily for failing to understand what the problem was and what the solutions to that problem are. Now, our trust package is initially a package of 10 trusts consisting of one master trust that will hold assigned currencies pre-RV and financial assets like bank accounts and investment accounts post-RV. Our optional gift sub-trust if you wish to give currencies to family and friends pre-RV to avoid the federal gift tax and control the post-RV proceeds, and 8 additional standard sub-trusts to hold homes, cars, boats, etc. This was the simplification of our rather sophisticated trust package we utilized in the past for our more affluent clients, a package that had an initial cost of anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. But by mass marketing this trust to denarians, we've been able to reduce the cost to $3,000. There are a number of ways you can pay for that. If the things we've discussed here today, I would strongly suggest you contact us to get our initial no-obligation package. It does contain everything you need if you wish to proceed with the establishment of your family asset protection trust package, but you're under absolutely no obligation to do so. The package has a lot of information about us, about the trust, about the currencies, and the political issues I've discussed here today. You can review the package, contact us if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you. Again, if you wish to proceed, everything you need is included in the package. Again, contact us. We'll be glad to assist you. You can contact us either by email or phone to get our initial package. Our email address is trustswithans_LLC@gmail.com. That's trustswithans_LLC@gmail.com. And our phone service is 307-274-4122. That's 307-274-4122. Contact us by email or phone. We'll get our initial package right out to you. Review the package. Contact us if you have any questions. Everything's there. If you wish to proceed, we'll be happy to assist you in every way. It's a shorter call today. We have been inundated with trust requests. And as much as we have going on here, we love to help everyone that understands, as an American citizen, the importance of exercising your constitutional rights. They're trying to take them from us. And the best way to fight them is to exercise them. And I strongly suggest you do so. If you want to protect what you have for yourself and your family and your posterity, this is your chance to do so. Thanks so much for listening to this call. We will have a call next Wednesday. Certainly if something of dramatic nature happens, we'll get out an emergency email and try to schedule an emergency conference call. But failing that, we'll be back next Wednesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and have a great week. Bye-bye now.